Today we're talking about puddings and a few other questions. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers with Jas-Townsend and Son. So we got some great questions today. Here's one from Randy Chadwick, and he's asking a question on the syllabub video that was just out, and he says, I've seen the staff at Pensbury Manor, William Penn's home in Pennsylvania, make this during their annual holiday celebrations. I seem to recall that their version of topping hardened and was more of a dessert. Even though their time was before the 18th century. Do you think that this could have been the addition of the egg whites that you mentioned? Yeah, it sounds like that everlasting syllabub, and more than likely they put egg whites into that whipped cream topping mix, and then you beat that up until it really stiffens, and that's likely what they were making. They could have been using a later recipe, even though they're an earlier setting. I'm not sure about that one. Another question on the syllabub. It's by Onward to Innisfree. And he says, does Michael have his own YouTube channel? And no, he doesn't. So you guys are going to have to lobby Michael, Michael Dragoo, to have his own YouTube channel. I think that would be fun. Here's our main question. It's from Ashrack12, and it's on the cabbage farce. And it's a very simple question. It says, what did they mean by a pudding in the 18th century? And you know, that's oddly a fairly large topic. The term pudding really is a much earlier term, let's say, 14th, 15th century. And the term really is the word pudding is based on a word that means gut. And these very, very early puddings were something a bit more like a sausage, or say a haggis. The first puddings were like that. They were always a boiled item. They were boiled inside of a gut or inside of intestines, and they many times had meat in them most of the time, sometimes with some grains added, or they would be like, let's say, a black pudding or a white pudding, which is made with blood or other things like that. So you would have puddings. That's what these original puddings were like. So in the 17th century, there's a shift where they sort of invent the cloth pudding, where they, instead of using a gut to make their pudding, they actually started using cloth, just a piece of cloth, to make the boiled puddings. And that really started increasing what puddings were. And sometime at about that time and a little bit later, pudding started to be baked too. So they stopped using the bag and boiling them necessarily, and baking started to become more into what was happening, and they would just put the pudding contents into a dish and they would bake them. Sometimes they would put them into a dish and they would put them in a bag and boil that. So the idea of a pudding starts to really expand in the 17th century, and especially in the 18th century. So all of a sudden, it's not just a gut being boiled, but it's things being boiled in a bag. It's the same kind of mixture of things being baked. Then it starts to expand even more. You would get quaking puddings and blancmanges, and so you almost start getting a custardy kind of thing happening. And so that term keeps expanding and expanding, and then as you get into the 19th century, the terms start to break up, and the items are starting to be called different things. So what started to be in the 18th century was called a pudding, then gets another name. So that whole, it's sort of like a tree growing up, and that those names break up and turn into things that we wouldn't call puddings at all today. A great example of that would be something like what we refer to as a traditional pumpkin pie in the 18th century, they would call a pudding. And something that we do call a pudding really isn't what they would have thought of as a pudding in the 18th century. So you get a big shift in the term of pudding. So in the 18th century, a pudding could be a lot of different things. So if you're interested in puddings, we've got a pudding playlist. We've done a lot of different puddings, both baked puddings and boiled puddings. So make sure to check out that pudding playlist. If you've never tried a boiled pudding, I would try, we did an episode called Another Hasty Pudding, and they just made a very small little boiled puddings. That one's really easy. It's a great place to start with boiled puddings. I want to thank everyone so much for all the great, wonderful comments, your great suggestions, and the very on-point questions. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're a new viewer and you haven't subscribed, press the subscribe button up here. That'll take you to a spot where you can subscribe. That really is the best way to get notification of all the new videos that are out. I want to thank everyone for watching.